I want to start last year actually. So you all went through a bit of a change. I call these reverse acquisitions. It's a new thing that's been happening in tech where it's what you guys went through and what many others have now gone through, and I think more companies will go through. Um, what was it like? I mean, you were already inside the company, but what was it like going through that process? Take us a little bit into that week, the months leading up to it, like as much as you can. Share. I'd be curious just for people to understand. I think it's like it was a quick thing, right? It happened fast, and what was that like?
Meta invested $14.5 billion for 49% of the company. So it was an investment. We're an independent company. And we had our best year ever last year. So quite different than some of the
Yeah.
other deals that you're referencing. Going through the process was, it was fascinating, right? Like I've been in tech for a long time. How often do you have a deal of that size at all? And then to have a deal where, as part of the deal, the founder goes to Meta, and then I take over the remaining, billion-dollar business that's still there. There was a bit of a culture shift. Like what helped it out a lot was I'd already been at scale for almost a year at that point.
COO at the time.
Yeah, I was acting in that capacity. I actually came in to help sort of get our applications business supercharged, a little bit more organized than it was. Scale had a lot of things going on, and so I sort of added capacity in that way. And then I moved on to help out the data business as well. So I actually almost accidentally got like a tour of the business before this happened. And it all came together in, I don't know, a month or two. It's $14.5 billion deals don't come along every day. It was fascinating to be a part of.
Yeah. How do you step in for such a famous tech CEO like Alex? How does that like? What has that process been like? Has there been anything that surprised you? I think he still kind of hangs over the company. Like if you Google scale, right, comes up. Like obviously he's still on the board. He's at Meta, and Meta's a huge investor. But like, how do you step in as the CEO with such a large figure who founded?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Alex is this legendary entrepreneur. The scale's 9 years old. A lot of people think it's like a more recent company. He's established himself as, one of the leaders in AI. What really helped was we already knew each other and we trusted each other and we worked together for like the period before. And I was helping him with a lot of things, and the company saw that. And they saw that we like trusted each other, and we played our roles. Like I've scaled a lot of businesses, and got to scale, but this was his first business. And so I brought in a lot of those best practices, and, we worked together to adopt them. And so it wasn't as like, there wasn't as bright of a line as you might think from the outside, because the company already knew me. They already knew the management team that stayed behind. A lot of people don't know that only, 10 or 20 people went to Meta as part of the transaction. So, and for perspective, we have over 1,000 people in the company. And we have existing businesses and existing customers. And then what he left behind was the vision and mission, which the people at the company are super passionate about. And so, yeah, of course, like they're big shoes to fill. Alex is an iconic entrepreneur. But it did help that I was familiar with the company. Within a few months, we were sort of like, sort of pumping again after people sort of understood like, how am I going to behave differently? What are the decisions I'm going to make? I don't think that, a lot of times in those processes, there's like a fear of change. And then within a few months, you're like, okay, like we're good to go. Like our Q4, we had the best revenue in the company's history. It was also
Can you say the number?
over $1 billion run rate.
Okay.
It was also
That's your annual run rate?
yeah, over $1 billion. And actually, last year we did $1 billion of new contracts, and in the fourth quarter, more than half of those contracts came in the fourth quarter. So ramped into a lot of momentum going into.
Yeah, and I want to get into that. Is Alex still pretty involved? Do you talk to him a lot about strategy?
Yeah, he's a board member.
Yeah.
Our relationship is as with a board member, right? Like, he gives me advice, where he sees it. I bring him topics just like I would bring any other board member, and we interact in that way. And it's a super positive relationship.
It's interesting. I think, yeah, you all are a rare example of a reverse acquihire where the company seems to actually be stronger after, right? Like there's been a lot of these type of deals where it kind of breaks the culture because the founders have left, That must have been challenging to try to like maintain that culture, keep it going steady. And then it sounds like now the business is growing pretty rapidly afterwards. And I'm wondering like, what is it about scale and where you guys are at that lets you all go through that pretty chaotic, transition and come out so strong so quickly?
Look, there's a lot of demand. And so the market is there for the products that we have. And so, like there's one scenario where this deal happens and all of your, you're like, okay, all the IP left the company and you're like, what do we do now? But literally the next week, all of our customers are asking us, hey, can we go? Like we need products, we need data, we need start working together. Like we know this big thing happened. Let's chat about it. Okay, we're good. Meta is a passive investor in the company. They don't have preferred access to anything. Yes, they're a customer, but there was a lot of misunderstandings about the relationship. And so we went through our customers and we talked to them about that. And we kind of just hit the ground running. I think there's a perception that it was maybe more dramatic than it was, and it was a big event, but very quickly the company snapped back to executing.
Maybe you can clear the air here too. There were reports about how some of the big labs had pulled spending because they were worried about the Meta relationship. What is the state of your relationship with all the frontier labs?
Yeah, we work with most of the frontier labs.
Okay. So you wouldn't say that the relationships net have been like damage beyond repair.
For the most part, that's correct. Yes.
So scale is in an interesting spot because it pioneered the data labeling business as it exists really. And now you're doing these more vertical applied AI businesses. How does the business look now? What are the different pillars? Which one's growing fastest?
Yeah. So there's two parts to the business. One is we generate human data that we sell to the models, which is the business you referenced before. And then as part of being in that business for so long, when people started to implement models in enterprises and in governments, they realized it's hard to make them do what they thought that they could do. And so 2 or 3 years ago, we got almost pulled into this business because we had such experience with applying data to models and making them effective at performing a task, which is what we do for the foundation models as well. We give them data, and if a model is deficient in a certain capability, we provide the data, and the data is what drives the capability. You have the same problem in enterprises and governments. That business, this is a very, very big problem. Like what happened, if you just stepping back, right? So if you think about tech history, if you go back to the 90s, people had to get modems, and that slowed the adoption, right? And then you had to lay broadband for the next wave, and then you had to buy a mobile phone for the next wave, and that made these waves 5, 7, 8 years. In this wave, it's more or less a software-only like transition. And so when ChatGPT launched, yes, you got to buy chips and there's some data centers, but like when ChatGPT launched, 100% of the world said, "Oh, I want to take advantage of all these promised benefits." And so the demand surge that came from that when they realized that this is harder than they thought was just a tidal wave of interest. And so that side of the business, we're basically supply constrained. It's very hard for us to fill the amount of demand that we have to put these models to productive use.
Is that a human bottleneck? Is it a compute bottleneck?
Yeah. So the way that it works is we have a software platform that we deploy, and we have human beings that have to sit with the customer to understand the problems that they're trying to solve, and then to design an architecture to build on top of our software.
It's a very high touch sales.
It is a high touch. There's no product you can give an enterprise that will solve their AI problems. If anyone's being told that, it's just simply not true. And so you've got a situation where the more capable the people are that are on site with the enterprise or the government, the greater likelihood of success, and the more experience those people have with the models, the better off you'll be. And one thing we've noticed is kind of interesting is that what the models are asking us for, about 2 years later, 18 months to 2 years later, and we have enough of a track record where we just started noticing this pattern, enterprises and governments start asking us for. So like, for example, red teaming is the process to say, hey, will the model say things or do things that I don't want it to do, right? And things that are dangerous or unsafe or whatever. No one in the enterprise or government space was asking about this 2 years ago. And now it's one of the most common asks because the applications are getting to a level of maturity. For years, they weren't even productive. They weren't even working. Right. And so if it's not working, you're not going to test it for safety. And now that they're starting to work, like those things are starting to become common asks of enterprise and governments. And this is a service we were offering to the models like 2 years ago. So we've noticed this pattern of this like shift of when a model asks for something, a few years later, enterprises and governments will ask. And I think it's part of the change management process, part of the development process. Like here's another example that we suspect will be very, very common in enterprises. Is uh, um, we supply environments, which is effectively like a sandbox or a playground, with an objective in it for a model to train on.
Like a gym.
Yeah, like a gym.
Yeah.
Yeah. You put like this podcast on a calendar in a sample environment, and then you ask the agent, like, hey, move this calendar invite from Tuesday to Wednesday, and then it learns how to do that, right? So you give it like an objective that a human might actually do. That's like, and we provide these sample environments to the model builders. We don't hear that at all on the application side of the business, but makes a lot of sense that as your applications become more sophisticated, you're going to need an environment for your agents to train on for enterprise specific, for government specific, for customer specific issues. And they don't have that today.
So is most of your business now increasingly government, or is it pretty still mixed?
On the applications side of the business, it's about half private, half government.
Okay. Because you've got some big contracts. There was that $100 million Pentagon contract.
2 of those, actually.
2 of those.
They came within a couple of weeks, so
Yeah.
it's easy to get them confused.
Are you kind of agnostic with governments you'll work with? What is the scale philosophy on engaging with sovereigns and governments?
Yeah, absolutely. We work with allies of the U.S. government, NATO countries, and we believe that exporting American technology is a good thing, and so that's sort of our guiding principle there.
On the labeling and training side, competition has increased a lot for you guys, right? There's Turing, Handshake, Invisible, even Uber, your former employer, is getting into labeling different, but still, it's kind of encroaching a little bit on, I would say, the turf that Scale, really carved out. I'm curious how you see that market and the competition playing out. Do you think there's going to continue to be all these players, Mercor, for example, or do you feel like there's going to be consolidation? Like how is that going to play out? What do you think about competition?
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of these questions, you have to sort of like dig into the nuances of the market. The reason why model builders come to us is because creating like there's different types of data. There's and where the margin, where the business, where the expertise is in frontier data. And frontier data is data that helps the models do things that they could not do before. It is identifying things in the models that maybe the model builder thought was good, but we collaborate with them to say, hey, it could be better, and here's some data that could make that better. That is our primary business. There's a long tail of other data that is needed to go into these models, but that's where the money's made, that's where the market share is made, and that's where the reputation's made. That is very difficult operationally to produce that data at volume. If you can produce 100 of those tasks, it's not good enough in many cases. You need to be able to produce thousands of those tasks. And so here's an example, right? So let's say you want your model to be good at, well, I'll pick a simple example, astrophysics, right? Well, how you need human beings who understand astrophysics in a deep and legitimate way, who have a good reputation, who you trust that they're going to actually give you the data in a way that will improve the model reliably. You have to have a big network of contributors. We call the people that supply data contributors, to actually have enough people to supply it at the volume that will make the model change. So we have hundreds of thousands of people in our contributor network. And so, 500 of those might be astrophysicists, or 300, right? And so if you have a smaller network, it's just not going to work because you don't have enough people to tap into. So actually, there's only a few providers who can provide this at volume, even though there's a very long tail of data providers. There's no question that there's like 1,000 startups doing this. The reality is that the actual market share between the players has not changed very much in the past couple of years.
So the scale of your contributor network is the moat on that side of the business then?
Yeah, well, it's two things. It's the contributor network, and it's can you trust this network? Because these people are all over the world. So you have to have a pretty sophisticated vetting mechanism to know, like, are you who you say you are? And how do we know that you know astrophysics? And actually, the process to validate it, that is not simple at all, because you have to triangulate on the performance. You have to have operations teams that are very knowledgeable, and the type of data that they're producing is often misunderstood. And this is what I mean about like enterprises and governments like tend to realize things that the models realize like a couple years later. Like the type of data we're providing, people think it's this poem is better than that poem. That's like, I think when people think of scale, that's what they think of. And it hasn't been that for like 3 or 4 years. The type of data is like this, like a rubric of a good answer to an astrophysics question would have these 5 characteristics. And writing a good rubric is actually a very specific skill. And having an operations team that evaluates what a good rubric is a very specific skill. And so scaling that to thousands of tasks, each of which paid out at hundreds of dollars a piece, is, we're not talking about a commodity process. This is this is something that requires a lot of skill. And so on the frontier data side is where we differentiate, and that's where we excel.
Because you're so close to the models, I'd be curious to hear your predictions for how you think model progress will play out this year. I think last year, obviously, like Gemini 3 was great. Opus 4.5 is blowing everyone's mind. More on the applied side of it, right, with the product stuff that Anthropic's doing around it. Do you see the models having meaningful kind of step function gains this year, similar to last year? Do you see reacceleration?
Yeah, I mean, even having a bit of an inside, window into like the data that's going into them, the actual leaps in the models are still very hard to predict. Because we supply the data for what they want to do, what they do with it during the training process. So it's a combination of all these things that create the gains. Sometimes you expect a big gain and there's not one, and sometimes you don't expect one and there is one. And so like my general view is that these things are going to continue to accelerate at a similar rate that we've seen in the past. And yeah, you might have these troughs where people expect acceleration every 90 days and it might take 6 months. I think our expectations of how fast this stuff will move has gone up a lot. And when there's like 1 or 2 releases, we're like, oh, it's not quite as good as I thought it would be. It's like, oh, maybe it's all stopped. It's like, well, no, but 6 months ago, the news cycle is that this is going to, AGI is coming in 2 years. Right. So I think we need to zoom out a little bit whenever we're, making these predictions. I think the year over year increase when you talk about adding infrastructure, the amount of money going into chips, into data centers, into like research around model building and making them more efficient, and innovations in types of data that you can provide it, all these things combining together, I think you're going to see a significant amount of progress going forward.
You're also doing work to evaluate models and put rigor around how they're benchmarked. You got the SEAL program, and I think there's maybe aspirations to maybe do like the Oscars for AI models at some point, right?
Yeah, we had awards actually.
Yeah, doing awards, but like build that up and become kind of the go-to for that. I mean, there's people think of like Ella Marina as the place where people chart things, but it's interesting because that's like like you don't have to be logged in to vote on that. It's kind of like random, I think, like how they get their data. It's not known. So you guys are putting some rigor around it. I'm curious, like how critical is that for the rest of scale to be the place where people go to go, okay, this is objectively as we can know what models are performing in what way and what's winning.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's super important for us, right? Research is a huge part of Scale's organization in terms of understanding where the frontier can go, and understanding what preferences are. We have a product called Showdown, which we collect all the demographic information for the people participating in it. So we provide a different product than what Ella Marina is providing to the models. I think there's going to be demand for that type of a service for a long time to come. The model builders are always going to want to have a third party view on like, what do people think of my data? And like, not just what do people think, but what do segments of people think? And what do sub-segments of people think? And we're not even there yet. Right now, we're at like, what do people think? And so I think that business has a very long trajectory. And as far as research, like it serves a few benefits for us, right? One, we're providing frontier data to the model builders. Two, whenever we're working with customers doing implementations, we need to have the absolute latest knowledge of what the models are capable of so we can advise and build for those customers. Whenever we're building applications for customers, the very first thing that we do is we say, is this a good problem to solve? Because a lot of the sort of disappointment and sort of chatter about like, well, where will enterprise AI go? It reduces down to a big chunk of it is people choosing the wrong problems to solve that won't produce the right ROI, that are maybe unsolvable with the technology because they don't actually understand what are good solvable AI problems.
Just like throw AI at it.
Yeah, just like, oh, it's 99% accurate. Maybe it'll be 99.5% accurate if we throw AI at it. Like I said, that's a terrible AI problem. A good AI problem is a problem where humans are not generally good at it. It takes a long time for them to do it. It's expensive for them to do it, and they don't like to do it, right? And we live every single day with these types of problems, and we deal with it every day, and we've sort of like taken it for granted. Um, and those are great AI problems. And so we say with our customers, say like, what's the problem that you should solve? And we know that and have confidence to know that because we do the research, the leaderboards, the deep evaluations of the capabilities.
Yeah. Right before this, I came from OpenAI had an event down the promenade here in Davos where they were doing a big countries push. So this was, I think they're trying to do more vertical, on-prem custom deployments for sovereigns. And I was thinking like, are the model providers themselves also coming for your business? Maybe you've got all these competitors on the labeling side, but how do you think about the foundational model frontier labs? And I mean, Anthropic's a huge B2B business. I'm sure they want to go more vertical in all the key, industries. How do you protect scale from that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the premise of this question like gets lost in the actual details of the implementation, because like in order for this to happen, the number of things that have to be true is so long that it's almost like the people who put this out don't understand enterprises, and it's a good question. I'm happy
The
to.
labs, are you saying, or the media that talks about this as like a thing that's
Yeah, I'm saying that the posture that you're going to plug a model into an enterprise and then automatically take all of their proprietary data. The model is going to create things that also accumulate all of the human data, which is not recorded, which actually is the data that you really need to make applications work. There's this idea that all of the recorded information is in one place. It's accessible. It is processable. It's easy to turn it into AI-ready data. And then it can just like pop out an application. It's not even close to happening today. The idea that it would happen in the next couple of years, I think, is like very far-fetched. And will the models get better? Absolutely. Like they're gonna get better. Like they will get better and better and better at general tasks. They will get better and better and better at healthcare tasks. But if you're, one of our customers is Mayo Clinic, right? So they have 100+ years of information, expertise, knowledge, data. I mean, a whole lot of their data isn't in one place, right? A whole lot of their data is behind root access, through IT administrators. A lot of what they do in their organization and the judgment that needs to be digitized for the model builders to I think the hypothesis here is they automatically can just like turn enterprises into like, completely autonomous agent, uh, and the knowledge that we work with enterprises to digitize is the judgment of the human beings. That is not recorded. That is not immediately accessible through like a integration. You actually have to work with a customer, understand what problem that they're trying to solve, connect the right people, get those people to produce the right data, work with them to actually make sure that it solves the problem, create the proper evals. There's so many steps in this process that as the models get better, what it will do is it will enable these enterprises and governments to do even more sophisticated things faster. But our business is to take the last mile of judgment and digitize that, which is not something you're going to be able to do with a model out of the box.
But I guess my point is more the because I think everyone understands there's margin here, right, in this business. And so the model providers, you don't think, especially OpenAI and Anthropic, don't see that opportunity as well of doing last mile.
I mean, I think
They're building out go-to-market. They're building out like forward deployed teams. Like,
I hear you.
That's what I'm saying. Like, is that a threat?
It is not something that we see on a day-to-day basis today as being a threat. Like their primary business is being in the model building business. Our primary business, we live or die as to whether or not the applications and agents that we build for our customers deliver measurable ROI. And that is our business. That is a different organization, different culture. We're flying, PhDs in, machine learning to healthcare providers to sit there for weeks, right? That is a different motion. That's a different expertise. That's a different culture than, hey, we want to build the best model in the world and get as close as possible and get millions and millions of customers.
What's the craziest, like most niche, super high value information thing? You mentioned flying PhDs to like, what are you guys like are you scouring the earth looking for like experts in the most random thing imaginable? What's an example here?
Well, so I mean, there's really two. I mean, there's the AI experts, which are employees of scale, and then there are the people providing data to scale, and by consequence, like into the models, which are really gig workers, consultants for scale. And so there are sort of two different things. Like we bring research level talent into our customers, which I think is quite unique. And then on the contributor side of things, a lot of it, like what's the most I mean, here's something that might surprise you. We have this network of hundreds of thousands of people. 11% of them have a PhD or above. 30% of them have a master's degree above, and 80% have a bachelor's degree above. We had a professor at a Ivy League school make, I think it was $50,000 in a week on scale, providing data that was so valuable as part of Humans Last Exam, which was this data pack that we provided. And so this woman provided such valuable tasks that we thought were just, we couldn't find anybody to do it, that we kept raising the price. And then she came in and knocked out like 5 in a week.
Wow. Okay.
That's an example of like the depths to which we are sort of taking human knowledge, digitizing it into software, and providing it to the world, which is actually very cool, right?
Maybe if this media thing doesn't have a future for me, I have an alternative career path now.
Absolutely. If you know, astrophysics or like, ancient Greek culture or like,
Well, cool, Jason. I appreciate it. We'll end it here. Thank you for coming on.
thank you. Appreciate the time.